They walked in chains so we don't have to. We often forget the dark cloud of slavery that hung over humanity for an age, and the pioneers that imagined a clearer sky. The forgotten time when millions were not born free. These films are about those dreamers who saw a clearer sky and the dark cloud of slavery that still fogs our modern world. With these series of films, we will explore one of those who imagined a brighter future, publishing a book in 1791 during the height of the transatlantic slave trade. The book was originally called The Thoughts and Sentiments on the Evil and Wicked Traffic and Commerce of the Human Species. This is a Therapeutic Productions project. Dark Thoughts Chapter 1, Ottobah Cugano, Early Life and Writings.
The case of Cugano is very, very interesting because he is the first Afro-Briton, let's call him that, to come out and write a book about slavery, write about British imperialism in general. He also comes out and talks about human rights. He is by far and away at the time the most kind of radical figure within the abolitionist movement in Britain.
Even among the profligate adventurers, which were sent to conquer and desolate the New World, there were some persons that retained some tincture of virtue and generosity, and some men of the greatest reputation of both gentlemen and clergy, which did not only remonstrate but protest against these measures and carried on.
Well, we know more about his early life than we do about most people who were enslaved in Africa, but we certainly don't know as much as we'd like. What he tells us is that he was a Fonte in what is present-day Ghana, that he was kidnapped by fellow Africans in around 1770 when he was about 13 years old, and he was sold to English slave traders who brought him across the Atlantic through the Middle Passage to Grenada. And he was there for a couple of years. He was owned by Alexander Campbell, who brought him to England and at the end of 1772, which was a very significant year to bring an enslaved person from the Caribbean to England, because a few months before Cugano arrived in England, there was the famous Mansfield decision in which Lord Chief Justice Mansfield ruled that any enslaved person brought to England from the colonies could not legally be forced back to the colonies as a slave. Campbell had renamed Cugano John Stewart, and friends of Cugano, John Stewart, had advised him that as a kind of extra security insurance against being sent back to the Caribbean, he should get himself baptized, which he did in 1773, in August of 1773, in St. James Church, Piccadilly. And he was baptized as John Stewart, 16 years old.
So I do think his work is very, very interesting. Also, to learn about the experience of enslaved people from a first hand, I think that's very important. In philosophy, that's called standpoint theory. That says that your own personal experiences shape your perspective on the world. And basically, that's different for everybody. But the case is that in philosophy and in much of academia, actually, the perspectives, the unique perspectives of minorities and oppressed people have been ignored totally or neglected. That's true, for example, about female philosophers. That's definitely true with philosophers of color. We need those kind of ideas, those kind of experiences that I, as a white man, cannot have, per definition, cannot have.
I think for young people, the connection of history, it's connecting the past to the future. And one of the things that, one of the sayings that I've always loved is that if you don't know your past, you don't know where you're going. The thing with history is we're not teaching global history enough. I think young people need to be a bit more aware of not just things that happens locally, but things that happens on a wider field.
Then there's a big gap of about a dozen years, where we don't know what's happened to him, but suddenly he becomes, by 1784, he's in the employ of the fashionable painters Richard Cosway and his wife Maria Cosway, and he's living in the Schomburg house, which still exists. There's a plaque on the wall that acknowledges his existence there, and that's on Pall Mall. And we know about him for the next few years because of the association with Cosway, because Cosway was caricatured in both prints and plays, and often with a black servant, who was obviously John Stuart Cugano. And we know that Cugano, through Cosway, had connections to the court, because Cosway in 1785 was appointed the official painter to the Prince of Wales. So that's how Cugano got his entry into the fashionable world. So he met the Prince of Wales, obviously, often, but he also later corresponded with the Prince of Wales, with Edmund Burke, with the king himself. He sent letters to. They exist in manuscript, all of which he was doing when he was trying to sell his book. Because in 1787, he published his major work on thoughts and sentiments on the evil and wicked traffic and commerce of the human species, which is a book-length polemic against the transatlantic slavery and actually slavery itself. And this is a very radical work.
There is good reason to suppose that it was far from the intention of Ferdinand, King of Spain, to use his new subject in America in the brutal and barbarous manner that his people did, and happy for the credit of the nation and the honor of mankind.
It actually was interesting because it didn't cause quite a stir. It was, as far as I can tell, it was never reviewed. And we don't know why it was never reviewed. It could be because it was so much more radical than anything else that had been written up until that point about the slave trade and in opposition to the slave trade. In 1791, he published an abridged version of the book in which he included subscribers, the list of subscribers, that is, people who paid in advance for copies of the book. And they included people like Richard Cosway himself, of course, and Sir Joshua Reynolds, the most famous painter of the 18th century, certainly at that time, of the 18th century. So again, it indicates how well connected Cugano was through his employment with Cosway. But still, that book was, even the abridgment was never reviewed.
The book used words like evil and wicked to describe the act of slavery, language rarely used by his contemporaries. Cugano didn't just hope for a better future, he demanded it. His writing stands as a true declaration of freedom.
Sometimes your culture can become embarrassing because it represents something other than the established norm. And you want to fit in. You want to be seen, to have all the badges that represent being part of the wider community. So over the years, I've had people turn around and say to me, "Oh, I don't see you as being black." And I'm thinking, hello, yes, I am black, and I do want you to see me as being black. Why do you want to erase me? Why do you want to diminish me? That is central to who I am.
Well, we know very little about his life in the Americas, in Grenada, except that he tells us he was there and that Campbell, his owner, Alexander Campbell, at this time owned hundreds of slaves on various plantations in different colonies, in different islands in the Caribbean, and that he was there for a couple of years being taken around. He obviously got exposure to some literacy. He was renamed John Stewart, which may indicate that Campbell used him as a steward and exposed him to some education because he would then be more valuable to him as a commodity. But other than that, it's just speculation. Then as far as in Great Britain, as I mentioned before, suddenly in the 1780s, he gets into the employ of the Cosways, gets access to the highest levels of British society and to royalty, feels confident enough to write to the Prince of Wales, to the King George himself, all both he's marketing because he's sending them letters, writing these letters to accompany copies of his book and trying to enlist them in the cause.
You might think that most of the analysis of slavery happens in the discipline of history, but a lot of it happened as well in philosophy, but also in economics, for example, or in sociology. And so if we bring those perspectives together, only then we will get a really thorough, really comprehensive picture of what enslavement and slavery was. Yeah. And is still, of course.
As descendants of slaves, it's not always easy to feel connected to our ancestors. So much of our history was lost or twisted, leaving us unsure of where we truly come from. That disconnection can leave you feeling caught between two worlds. Economics is one of the cleanest ways to see how slavery has impacted our culture. After everything our ancestors went through, we've come to understand the value of fair trade and how it can uplift us as people.
So it is a fundamental aspect of human society as it fosters exchange of goods and services. It helps. Through trade, we engage with individuals and understanding the diverse cultures that we find ourselves in. And this promotes innovation, also enriches the diverse cultures that we have. So this how. So again, you can use international trade as well in how it has benefited our society here in the UK. And
Sharing ideas
sharing innovations, and so you'll be surprised that there are equally good innovators in these developing countries that help. I know companies here who recruit people from developing countries, and so I think it helps with the cohesion. With the cohesion of these cultures, and I think it's important going forward. Yeah.
And since that iniquitous traffic of slavery has commenced and been carried on, many gentlemen of the most distinguished reputation of different nations, and particularly in England, have protested and remonstrated against it.
Well, I think he'd see progress, for sure, because, we are free. So that in itself is progress. And what we do have in terms of freedom is the ability to make choices. So I think that's one of the hooks that people, who will look at us and think, well, you've got a choice. You can make that choice to do this or to do that. And then, again, that might cover a multitude of sins and things that have happened in the past. But I'm still saying that with all the progress that we've made, with all the opportunity, I cannot say that I have not had opportunity.
I think he'd be quite proud that he started something and raised the awareness, raised the narrative about being an ex-black slave and why people would do that, why another human being would own another human being. So I think it was good that he raised the narrative then, and I think he'd be pleased with some of the progress that has been made. Because I know I complain, but there has been progress.
I'm determined to say I'm not simply black British, I'm black English. And the reason why I say that is because I feel that if the best you can do is be black British, you're saying to the rest of the world, to be English, you have to be white. And also you're saying to the rest of the world, to be English, not only do you have to be white, but you can only be black British. You're on the outside looking in. You can never get to the heart of Englishness and English culture. And you were talking about integration. And for me, I'm not going to lose my blackness, but I'm going to say I'm English. So in my family, my nieces and nephews that are of mixed heritage and look very white, some of them have gone on to have their own children who look totally white, and they're quite happy to call themselves English. Whereas my nieces and nephews who are black and have children themselves who are also black, they still stick to black British.
Ottobah Kokowano's book, Thoughts and Sentiments on the Evil and Wicked Traffic of Commerce of the Human Species, nearly faded into obscurity. But his words endured, lighting a torch in the darkness of slavery, leading to familiar echoes throughout history. He saw a clearer sky during the darkest days when being free was just a dream. In the next part of this series, we will explore the oppressive industry of the transatlantic slave trade.
Soul survivor, taken from Africa with the art of a lion, fierce as a tiger. Soul survivor, taken from Africa with the art of a lion, fierce as a tiger. Burning and burning and burning up, burning and burning and burning up. Soul survivor, taken from Africa with the art of a lion, fierce as a tiger. So hot, so cold, so hard to reach. At the bottom of the pit, so hard to breathe. Calling out to God, please help me, please. Banged in chain, working in the rain. World spinning around like I'm insane.